is Nick Caley. So can we introduce America to him a little bit? He has college experience, NFL experience, but not a lot of people know much about him.
Yeah, I'll start here. He's one of the most important people in the NFL this year because it's his job to get an elite quarterback back on track. He worked for Sean McVay and Bill Belichick. Those are two pretty good coaches to work under, if you haven't noticed. But when you're a passing game coordinator for Sean McVay, you're not calling the shots. So this is a huge leap up for him. For me, with the Texans, do not attribute to the quarterback what you can attribute to the offensive line and to the play caller. Last year, it was bad. C.J. Stroud was pressured 50 more times in 2024 than 2023, and it showed. His deep ball went from 58% completion percentage his rookie year to 35% last year. So it's Nick Caley's job. What I like is in his first press conference, C.J. Stroud said that Nick is going to give him a lot of control at the line of scrimmage. Bobby Slowick did not give him that. I felt that Bobby Slowick's protection schemes were, frankly, it's at some points amateurish last year. You combine that with the personnel problems. Kenyon Green, who's now gone, was one of the worst offensive linemen in football last year. There's going to be a big step up here for the Texans. I think that C.J. Stroud's going to get back on track. He is as big a bounce back candidate as there is in this league.
As we keep obsessing over this O-line as being one of the main reasons why there wasn't regression for C.J. Stroud.
No.
He just didn't make the leap that a lot of people expected. Mina, do you think the Texans have done enough to rectify some of those issues?
Yes and no. Yes, because I agree with a lot of what Kevin said there about how the coaching change could potentially help. You know, watching this Texans offensive line last year, which was a disaster, quite frankly, both in terms of pass protection and run blocking, the thing that also struck me often was they just looked so unprepared for pressure. You saw defenses as the season went on start running more games against them, sending types of blitzes that they routinely struggled to pick up. And so for Nick Caley and for this new look staff, job number one is getting the offensive line better prepared for that. The quarterback as well, by the way, he's part of that protection too. So I do think the coaching change could be helpful. But then at a certain point, you know, in January, throughout the season, but in January, the talent on the offensive line matters. And that's where I'm a little bit skeptical because I look at this group and I don't see that much improvement, frankly, and it would be surprising to me if on their own they played that much better than last year.
Yeah, one of the ways to avoid having your mediocre offensive line exposed is to keep them out of third and long. And that's something the Texans could not do last year. They were in third and long game after game after game. And that's because they couldn't run the ball on first down. On 1st and 10, they had the worst rushing success rate of any team in football, which is just measuring how often you're staying on schedule, not getting behind the chains. And so for the Texans, one of the things I think we might see Nick Caley do is something he mentioned in that press conference, which is gap scheme, something the Rams did a couple of years ago to really revitalize their run game. They had been a zone-heavy run team, and they switched to more gap schemes with Kyron Williams, got some bigger offensive linemen in there, and that really got that run game going. The Texans were a very zone-heavy run team last year, so I wonder if Nick Caley they brought in some heavier offensive linemen. Cam Robinson's in here, Trent Brown is here, Laken Tomlinson, those guys are all 320, 330 or above. Are they going to be more of a gap run team to kind of give defenses a little more to worry about on first down and then avoid those third and longs as a result?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah. I want to talk about this from a few different directions. The one thing that I want to ask if you guys know, like some of those stats that they bring up, I still struggle to find them, like what he just said about the rushing success rate. Anytime I ever try to find those, whether it's on Next Gen or whatever, like I can't ever find it. And I don't know if that's just some of these stats are just what like ESPN has, and you know, they're kind of like their own proprietary thing, and they're not easily accessible. But I always try to find them and I can't. So off the top, if you guys know a good way to do it, because I always look on Pro Football, you know, PFF, Pro Football Reference, Next Gen, all the usual suspects, and sometimes I can never find some of these stats that they just randomly whip out. But yeah, I mean, I do find it so interesting that you kind of have two camps of people who are willing to give CJ Stroud the benefit of the doubt, and you have some people who are just kind of like, no, regression. And I've talked about this a lot, and it's actually like a pet peeve of mine at this point, and something that I'm, you know, why I keep kind of discussing about this, because when you see how much he was pressured and what he had to deal with, I really think it's just so perfect that none other, and I hate to evoke Patrick Mahomes as I often do, but it's just like we saw what happened in the Super Bowl, and we saw how many people said, "Well, what do you want him to do?" His O-line failed it. He failed him, but then they don't extend that same grace to CJ Stroud. And like I struggle to understand. I understand why fans are like that. I get it, because fans are gonna have all different twisted, biased opinions, as you should, kind of like your fans. Like that's just how it works. I totally get it. I really do. I try my best to navigate it, but I don't understand why the media doesn't, because the media is supposed to be that separation. They're supposed to kind of develop their views and opinions with a degree of space between them. And I just don't get it. I really, really don't. And I think this take right here was actually a lot more grounded. I do. So I really appreciate it. I was happy to see that it was like a little bit more like, hey, they dealt with a lot of pressure. Bobby Slowick didn't really do a good enough job. Like I never heard anyone really talk about that on any of the more like true opinion based shows. I think NFL Live tries to be a little bit more technical, more stat driven than, and in fact, they have a lot of people often that never even played at all. So it's definitely kind of like, hey, let's look at this through a little bit more of a, intellectual way, which I appreciate. I appreciate it all. I appreciate the intellectual side, the opinion side, the stat side, the ex-player side, the ex-coach side. I like to kind of look at it through all the various lenses and kind of put the pieces together. But I think the thing that stood out to me more than anything is the unpreparedness. And that is just what leaped off the screen. I mean, I think one of the earlier games, I felt that they were so prepared. I think it might have been against, even though it wasn't the best game, I think it was against the Chicago Bears, and Bobby Slowick called just such a perfect play. And I think it was Chris Collinsworth was just like, man, that was just money, man. Like I remember I wrote, because I take notes when I watch the games, and I wrote the notes. I was like, oh my God, Bobby Slowick, legend, awesome play call, awesome timing, awesome everything. And I wrote that down, and I paused it as I was taking my notes. Then I hit play, and then I hear Chris Collinsworth just kind of, praise it as well. And I was like, all right, great, we're all on the same page. And it felt like from that point on, I had to really like dig to find those moments again, and even just the organization and execution. And it was a tough journey, honestly. It was tough to see, and it all culminated more than anything in the playoffs against the Chiefs. And the Texans were so clearly unprepared, but it wasn't because it's like, well, the Chiefs are just always so hyper prepared, and they're obviously always perfectly on time, perfectly coached, perfect execution. It wasn't that. It was almost like the Chiefs were just like, we're just gonna let you drown yourself. Like, here you go. Like, we don't even actually have to do anything. We don't have to push you to make mistakes. Yeah, the crowd's getting into it. Yeah, it's the playoffs. You feel the intensity of the moment. Like, we're just gonna let you guys do it yourselves. It's up to you. Just go. And that's what they did. And to me, it's just like, to see where everything went wrong throughout the season. Just watch the playoff game against the Chiefs. Just watch that game, and it's just like everything that you saw is what went wrong throughout the season. And my dad always talks about this. He always says this in any sport we're watching. He's always like, what, the issues during the regular season always come back to haunt you in the playoffs. Always, always, always. And, his expertise is baseball more than anything. And he'll always talk about, like, if you have a weak first baseman or something who's not good at fielding, he's like, it'll always come back to haunt you in the playoffs. It's going to haunt you. It's going to be the 8th inning. It's going to be, your team's up by 1, and there's going to be a tough ball hit to the first baseman, and he's not going to get it. And it's just like always going to come back to haunt you. You have a really weak curveball hitter in your lineup, it's going to come back to haunt you. Always, always, always. And it's to me, I think it's like that for all sports. You have a weak bench in basketball, comes back to haunt you. You have a weak O-line, it's going to come back to haunt you in the playoffs. You're disorganized. Yeah, you're able to find out how to, still gather some wins. It's why I always talk about this. And it's something that I'm so passionate about, that like football is not just about wins and losses. And I'm always up against it with fans in the comment section when like like especially with the Texans. Like the Texans won some games, and I was like, this wasn't a good game. And Texans fans were like mad at me, and I was like, guys, like I'm not a Texans hater. Like I was thinking C.J. Stroud was going to be an MVP candidate, and the Texans, I was like anything short of an AFC Championship game appearance, and I'm like, like this is not what my predictions were at. I was like, my whole thing was that the only way that they could miss the AFC Championship game is if they lose to the team that ends up kind of winning the Super Bowl. And in a way, that was kind of the Chiefs' journey, but I'm not convinced the Texans would have beaten the Bills or the Ravens either. We can play the hypotheticals all we want, doesn't matter. And so when I was watching them play throughout the season, I was just like, this is frustrating. And it was almost even frustrating that they would get the win, because then it would mask the issues. And that's one of the more dangerous things about winning sometimes, is that it masks the issues. It gives you the illusion. And that's how you find out how well run of a franchise are you? How well coached are you? Because a lot of coaches will talk about it's kind of great when you win and you don't play great, because then it gives you something to work on for practice, during the week. Because you get to say, yeah, we won, but look at all this stuff we need to work on. It gives you something. When and when you lose, it's a lot easier to convince people you did something wrong. It's like, we lost. This is why, like with the results speak for themselves. But not all coaches and not all teams have the ability to convince the team, to convince the roster, to convince the guys. And not all coaching staffs even see it that way, where it's like, yeah, we won, but like, man, we shouldn't have. We should not have won. You have some coaches, you have some locker rooms that are just kind of like, we got the dub. It's what it's all about. Let's go. And you keep trying to ride that momentum. And it's like, no, I'm such a firm believer in facing the reality of the moment. It's like, yeah, we won. Yeah, you know what? We ended up winning by 14. But the truth is, this was not a good game. This was not a good game. Yeah, we ended up winning by 14. That's awesome, and it sounds good. It feels good. But we did a lot of things wrong. And make no mistake about it, we absolutely, positively could have lost by 10. We absolutely could have lost by 10. And it's so important to try to figure out when those moments matter, when those games matter, because anytime I ever make a comment like that, I always see in the comment section, well, you could say that about every game. And it's true, but not with the same degree of intensity of that moment. Like technically, right, there's always a ball that can bounce a different way. There's always a ball that goes off someone's fingertips where if it didn't, you catch it. Now it's a big first down. Like you can always do that, but it's not always a net positive or net negative depending on which direction you're looking at it. So it's really important that when you watch the game and you look at it, when it's all said and done, like, yes, things could have gone differently for the Texans and things could have gone differently for the Jaguars, but like, who did it really impact the most? Where could things have really gone wrong, and what needs to change? A good example of this is actually with the Philadelphia Eagles, where they forced a bunch of turnovers against really actually like every team they play in the playoffs, but let's look at it pre-Super Bowl. Against the Commanders, because a lot of it was like, oh, this was a close game, but they forced all these turnovers, and then it kind of got out of control. But the Commanders were right there, and to a degree, there's a lot of truth to that, where it's like, the Commanders, if you took care of the ball, then maybe the game changes, and that's actually a true statement. But then when you zoom in a little bit more, you're like, but the Eagles were truly forcing these turnovers. These weren't just kind of like they caught the ball and they were running, and then like the ball carrier just dropped the ball, like it just hit his knee or something, and he just dropped the ball. It was like, no. This was more about the Eagles defense forcing the turnovers. Not to mention they forced all these turnovers against the Packers, against the Rams, against the Commanders, against the Chiefs. Like they did it every step of the way. So you could say this was more about the Eagles doing that. But it was still an interesting thing to contemplate. Okay, you're going to the Super Bowl now. These last 3 playoff games you've been great in, but the defense has really relied on turnovers. If you don't get those turnovers, can you still win the game? Are you too dependent on the turnovers? And the reality is they got all the turnovers in the Super Bowl, so we don't really know. Like if Patrick Mahomes didn't fumble the ball and didn't throw interceptions, it's like, listen, the way how that game was going, it felt like the Eagles would have still won. I think that's probably a fair conclusion to draw, but like they still got those turnovers. So like we technically won't ever know, but it is something that you kind of have to wrestle with. You kind of have to look at it from all the different angles. And I think with the Texans, there was a rejection of doing that. There was a denial of doing that. It was kind of just like, let's just put our heads down. Let's just keep trying to move forward. Let's just go, 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 go. So you never saw this team change, evolve, or grow. And again, they dealt with injuries. They dealt with their issues. But every time I kept thinking I'm banking on seeing a solution, I'm seeing a change, a difference of a game plan, I never saw it. I just never saw it. And so the execution and the disorganization is, was frustrating, was traumatic in a lot of ways. It's why going into this season, I'm still very optimistic, and I still 100% will defend CJ Stroud. Like, even if this CJ Stroud has another bad season and the Texans, don't even win the division, it's just a disaster. I still would not be on the side of like, did we crown CJ Stroud too soon or anything? Like, I wouldn't do that at all. I'd be like, no. This team is a mess. The coaching's a mess. Like, I have to wait and see how the season unfolds, but it's like, I would still be defending it, till I'm blue in the face. But like right now, I still very much am like, there was such disorganization last year. I need to see the organization this year. That's what I need to see more than anything. I want to see them get back on track. I want to see them get the momentum back. There's always the one clip that I wish I could show you guys, but I referenced it before, and it was when either the play got called in too late, whatever it was, but it was a key moment against the Chiefs in the playoffs. And it was just like, you clearly just should have just called a timeout. But instead, it was just everyone just rushed to the line. CJ had to just call hike, and I think he was probably flush out of the pocket pretty immediately. Like, everything was just rushed, and he had to just kind of do whatever he could, which was nothing essentially in that moment. And it was just like, this was too important of an part of the play. You had the timeouts, like, call the timeout. And what I said in a previous video with CJ, it was like, I need CJ now to be able to, and I understand why he didn't. It's year 2 for him, but in year 3, it's like, I want him to call the timeout now. If your coaching staff's not going to call the timeout, which I blame the coaching staff more than anything, but then it's like, CJ, time for you to truly embody and be a leader, and you call timeout. And then when you go to the sideline, you'd be like, you don't, maybe in the playoff moments, so you start yelling and chirping and being like, what the heck was that? What are you doing here? But like, later, maybe on like Monday or something, or after the game, but just be like, what are we doing here, guys? We can't win this way. Like, that's not how this works. Okay? You can't give me the play and then 2 seconds later I just quickly call a hike and then we just try to like make magic happen. We're not going to win games. Look at the teams of the years before that consistently win. With Tom Brady and the Patriots. Is that how they did it? No. Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. Is that how they did it? No. Is that how the Philadelphia Eagles did it when they just won the Super Bowl? No. So why are we going to do the things that the other teams that are winning do? Why are we going to do the opposite of what those winning teams do? Exactly. Like, it's like you don't have to go too far. You really don't. So it's just, little things like that drive me crazy, because to me, those are solvable issues. I don't always get mad when someone like drops the ball, when there's a bad pass or something like that, because like, unless it's happening regularly throughout the season, it's like, that's just unfortunate. It just happens. It just happens. Players are gonna have a bad throw. You're gonna fumble the ball. It's just like, Christian McCaffrey fumbled the ball in the Super Bowl, and I was just like, that's just bad luck. That's just like bad universal luck. Christian McCaffrey has to fumble the ball at least once throughout the season, and it just so happened that one of the fumbles was in the Super Bowl. It wasn't because it was a lap of judgment. It wasn't a mental error. It wasn't bad this, bad that. It was just how it goes. Steph Curry can't make every single 3. He's got to miss them some. Sometimes it's going to be in the regular season. Sometimes it's going to be with 2 seconds left, down by 2, NBA Finals. Like, it's just how it goes. But the mental mistakes, the failure to execute, that drives me crazy. That absolutely drives me crazy. And when you have a good coach, especially at a young age, they'll always talk about that. I don't care if you make an error or make a mistake being too aggressive. It's the mental mistakes, because it is. Those are what's coachable. That you are like so much more in control of than anything. So that's what I'm going to be also so zoomed in for the Houston Texans. I want to be like, do I see this team like actually ready? Do they seem organized? And it's just a wait and see. But those are just my thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think about CJ Stroud and the Houston Texans? Do you think they'll be able to kind of get back on track and, you know, have CJ Stroud continue to not only get back on track, but continue the journey that he was on to be a top and elite quarterback in the NFL? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment, so whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get in some discussions, let's get in some fights, but ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We are building an amazing community here, and I absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to, something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're on our way to doing it. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much. See you next time.